Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have something special because today is National Podcast Day. And so we wanted to do something real special for all our listeners out there and viewers that's on the YouTube. And so I brought in what I thought were three really, really smart lawyers that have really had astronomical growth. And they've done it kind of the same way, but then in many different ways. And so I'm just going to start from the left and go down off of my screen. Bert Parnall, the Parnall Group, law firm out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Bert got voted the best place to work in New Mexico, or maybe just Albuquerque, New Mexico. But it was not. It was done by it's not the usual deal where everybody goes in and votes. This was a very sophisticated scientific deal that was done. And that's one of the things I love about Bert's law firm. He's got a hell of a firm culture. He knows how to get A players, and he runs a really good tight ship. He's got really good A players. He's just really good. And then we got Scott Monge, Monge and Associates, a 200-member law firm headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. He's been identified by Trial Magazine as one of the most influential law firms in America, and his mission is to make good things happen to other people. And I've watched Scott grow from a small firm to just a mega firm, and it's got a lot of influence all over the country. And he's always thinking outside the box. So thank you for being here, Scott. Thank you, Bert. And last but not least is my friend from Seattle, Washington, Matt Dubin. And Dubin just has some astronomical growth. When I first met Matt, he was just like a solo law firm. And he just, in the last 7-8 years, he just had steady 50, 100% growth years. And he's just really knocking it out of the ballpark up in Seattle. And I thank all of you for being here and taking part, because I know you're all busy guys, and Bert's got his office manager or COO.
Operations manager, Ronnie Frere.
Right, and Ronnie, good to see you today. So let's get right down to it. I want to just each one of you very briefly tell about yourself, your law firm, your areas of practice, and how big you are, and then we'll go from there. We'll start with Matt, and then go to Scott, and then go to Bert.
Okay, well, thanks, Ken. It's really an honor to be grouped with these other attorneys, and I'm happy to be doing the podcast with you. I grew up in suburban New York and did my undergraduate at Yale. I actually moved out to Seattle to go to law school at University of Washington. Graduated in 95 and really had no idea when I started law school that I would want to do personal injury. Started working for a solo personal injury attorney in law school, and just really loved the idea of helping ordinary people who aren't necessarily sophisticated. They're not familiar with the legal system, and really so much is stacked against them. And once I got a taste of it, I knew this is what I wanted to do. I worked for that same lawyer for a couple of years, and then he lost a big med mal case and couldn't afford to pay me anymore. So I just went off on my own, and that was 98. And I really didn't think of my law practice as a business for many years. It was just me for 8 years doing everything, answering the phone, doing intake, doing the books, and going to court all the time. And, it was around 2010 or so that I joined Pilma. Also, my son was born. I changed my whole mentality. Started thinking of the firm as a business and really focused on growing it systematically. And just this month, we've hired our 43rd person. We have 10 attorneys. We cover all the state of Washington, and we do nothing but personal injury.
Thank you, Matt. Scott?
Well, first of all, Ken, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. It is an honor and a privilege to be here along with Matt Dubin and Bert Parnall and his COO, Ronnie. And so first of all, I'm just very grateful to be here. So anyway, my story begins, as far as really just growing up, the son of my dad worked in a family car wash business. My mom was busy raising 4 kids. I was the oldest of 4 kids, a family of 6. We had no lawyers in our family whatsoever. In terms of growing up, at times below the poverty line, I started work at a very young age, approximately 10 years old, paper boy, recycling, and landscape, whatever type of work there was, I did. There was no job that I was too good to do. And, I never left any job until I had another job lined up. Usually I was always working, multiple jobs at once. So, I carried that work ethic through. So when I graduated law school in Illinois, I went ahead, took all my earthly belongings, put them in my 1984 Chevy Chevette, drove on down to Atlanta, and set up shop, not knowing anyone or anything, and just kind of starting at ground zero, which for me was exactly the way that I wanted it to be, just because I've always had, for me, the American dream has always been very closely tied with the immigrant story of going someplace new and just basically, setting your stake, your claim, and just seeing what happens. And so, for me at the time, I was young, I was single, and there was no better time to fail, because if I lost everything, I'd only be out about $15. So anyway, basically just, to borrow a phrase from Ben Crump, I was a rent lawyer. I was doing any type of work that I could do that would pay the rent. And so I did all types of law. And the great thing about it was, since it was all new, there was no order of difficulty. And so I did all kinds of law, and then eventually over time narrowed that to personal injury. Nobody makes it alone in the world. So I was fortunate to have a lot of great positive influences along the way. And so, fast forward to where we are today, approximately 200 members, personal injury is our focus. And, we're headquartered out of Atlanta. So, that's a little bit about my story, my journey, and where the law firm is today.
Great. Bert?
All right. So I really admire the company that I'm in right now. Matt, Scott, Ken, and of course, Ronnie. We do personal injury, Parnall Law Firm. Hurt, call Bert is my slogan. And we number about 70, 75 people, maybe now 12 lawyers. And we've got a great team. The way we got there, it's all, when I say personal injury, mostly auto collisions, slip and fall, premises liability, dog bite, but also I used to be a prosecutor, so I help a lot of victims of crime. And it's rare, but more often than you would think that you can help a victim of crime, at least here in New Mexico. So I've been a lawyer 25 years. Like I said, I was a prosecutor for a number of years, and I enjoyed doing trials and advocating against the bad guy. And you don't really represent the victim, although you try and help. So when I got into the private world, enjoyed representing the client and helping that individual. And that has brought me personally a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment, is to be able to represent a person and help them in their life. And basically, I bought a practice from a very good plaintiff's lawyer who had a bigger practice and had tapered it down as he was slowing his private practice down. He became a judge. And so I bought his practice, and it was just very small, just a couple people, but I did some advertising because that's what he did. So I was following his model, and we slowly grew, or quickly, I guess you could say as well, for what it is, at least steadily. And at the moment where I was maxed out in this 2,000 square foot office, at that moment I had to decide, okay, am I going to do this? Kind of like Matt was saying, just doing my practice, and I enjoy doing it, or am I going to move, hire people, grow, etc.? And at that point I decided, okay, I can't do it all, but I want to help more clients. So how do I do that? So I decided at that moment, I need to grow my business. And it took me a few years, but I discovered Ken and Pilma. And that's when the client became not the person who was hurt so much as our employees in our the business. And so I take care of the business as if it were my client. And our values are the 5 T's: teamwork, talent, truth, tenacity, and triumph. And that's why I have Ronnie here, because, everything we do together is teamwork. She's my right-hand woman, and I also have a right-hand man, Greg Abel, my managing lawyer. And that's why I focus on, and thank you for, calling out our award for top place to work. And that's something that's brought me a lot of fulfillment and satisfaction. So that's brief or maybe long introduction
Good
about
deal.
us.
Great, guys. So I want to ask you one, two, three things that you would say were the key to your success of growing. And I'll start with you, Scott, and then go to Bert, and then go to Matt.
Sure. Winston Churchill said that courage is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And I think that one thing that is really key is just the same way that you develop your muscles in the gym when you're working out, you want to develop your muscles of just getting of resiliency and mental toughness and just getting used to doing things. And so I've done every position in the firm in terms of, you name it, from intake to reception to accounting, paralegal, attorney, whatever it may be, by virtue of necessity. And, and along the way, I think it's key, you got to get used to, those lessons that come from failure, from adversity, from overcoming challenges, from all those things, and just get kind of used to it. That's where all the lessons are, is in that area. That's one of the things that I would say that would be most helpful, and was most helpful for me in terms of looking back, was just really just going through, and just trying lots of things. Jim Collins in his book, From Good to Great, talks about, testing things small before you go big, and just going through and just, trying lots and lots of things. And, just like Thomas Edison talks about how he knows 5,000 ways not to invent a light bulb. Well, I probably know 5,000 or more ways of marketing that do not work at all, but it really makes you appreciate it when you find something that works, right? So, that's what I would say are some of the things that I have found helpful, along with also too, in terms of just looking back, when I started, there was no internet. And so in terms of practice and new market areas and all of that, I mean, at that time, it was like working in a geography where, you were close to your clients were close to us. And now things have, fast forward to where we are now. I mean, it really doesn't matter, where a good case is a good case. Doesn't matter where it is, if it's urban, if it's rural, where the case is, we will go where the case is. So that's one of the other changes and things that, the lessons I would say that have been helpful to me along the way.
Good deal. We had a speaker at our event several years ago that it wasn't the person that wrote the book Grit, but it was one of her students or whatever. But they did a lot of studies, and they said that the most successful people are not always the ones that did the best in school, but they were the ones that had the grit, that they, like you said, the relentlessness of never giving up. They just laser focus and just never accept defeat. Look at it like what you said. It's not a failure, it's a learning. I used to say learning, lessons, but some of them are just a lot more expensive than others. But but that's the way it goes. Bert, how about you? What are one or three things that you think were keys to your success now? Because I've watched you like triple, quadruple in the last 3 to 4 or 5 years. It's been crazy what you've done.
Thank you, Ken. And I really appreciate, Scott, what you said about going from failure to failure with enthusiasm. That's resilience, which I've talked about to the law firm several times at times of, downtimes. I'm going to answer 2 of those 3 things that were keys to our success, and Ronnie is going to answer another. So in terms of that enthusiasm, it's positive mental attitude, PMA. Napoleon Hill wrote about it 100 years ago, and the Stoics of, the thousands of years ago wrote about it as well. It's how you may not be able to change your circumstances, but you can change how you are going to respond to those circumstances. Yeah. And sometimes those circumstances are very tough. Sometimes they're just imagined, but it's always a mental exercise in how you react or respond to the very adverse nature of this world, which is, sometimes very tough. And but that's our job as lawyers, stewarding our clients in very tough cases. Our job as employers, stewarding our employees through how we communicate and turn in our rhythms and drama-free, etc. And so during our quarterly best practices meeting a couple of weeks ago, I talked about PMA, positive mental attitude. So that, I think, another analogy to that is staying above the line, which is, well, there's a whole concept on that, but basically, whether you're going to have gratitude or blame, you choose, gratitude or responsibility. I think that's one thing, and that, 90% of business or anything you do is really up here. Number two, I would say we've been very lucky and also worked very hard at our marketing, and we've had, over the past 3 years, just a growing number of cases. I mean, you can't have growth without the growth of cases and new cases coming in and doing well on those cases. Doing well on those cases brings more cases in because of the referrals, and we've capitalized on that marketing through your and help Ken and Matt's and many others who have contributed through our masterminds, as well as our marketing company. So just staying consistent, staying professional, that of course has contributed to our success, is bringing in new cases. And Ronnie's going to talk about the third thing.
And the third thing is a combination of 3 of our 5 core values, team, talent, and tenacity. I think we work very, very hard to build a good team, and it starts in the hiring process. It's a very thorough hiring process with many, many steps. And we try very hard not to deviate from that process in any way, because we have found that we have failed when we have deviated from that process. We'll think, maybe support staff, we don't have to be so strict with our guidelines, they're coming in to answer phones or do, e-filings or something like that. So it's clerical work. Then that we realized we failed in some regards because of bringing in those people to the firm that don't align with the remaining employees can cause you so much stress and heartache within your firm. So we've learned to stick to our hiring process and only hire the A+ players, the people that are going to take their work for you and your company seriously. They will align with your team. They will align with your culture. When you keep that mindset in your hiring process, you're bringing talent to your team, a huge, huge variety of talent. These candidates that you have screened thoroughly will bring you some great ideas, make great suggestions. They're not afraid to speak their mind and offer improvements. So you're getting a lot of good value in all of that. And tenacity will come with those employees as well. They will fight hard to find insurance coverage where nobody else could find it. They'll fight hard to get justice for the client in whatever way they can think of. That's a little bit about our culture, and it's all starting in the hiring process.
Yeah. That's probably why you got voted best place to work in New Mexico, don't you think? It's all about, if your core values, if everybody's not aligned, then you're going to end up having dysfunctions. And I think leadership and culture is the big deal. And whether the other two know it or not, I think it is. I've watched you both, and you both got good cultures, and you're both good leaders. And Bert's a great leader, and that, and you're not scared to build other leaders, because that's one of the barriers to growth, is not having enough talent to coach up other people to be leaders. Because when you get to 200, Scott, you can't lead 200 people at one time. You got to have other leaders underneath you leading too, right? Absolutely. Matt, how about you? What's 1 or 3 things that were keys to your success? And thank you, Ronnie.
Yeah, I smile when I listen to Scott and Bert talking, because it makes it so clear, like not just in law, but in any small business, it takes a certain mindset, a certain personality type, I think, to start and grow any business, and that resiliency and that determination is so fundamental. As you were asking the question, I wrote down values, vision, and effort. And I think I define those as knowing who you are, knowing where you want to be, and then showing up every day to take some steps in that direction. I often tell people when I'm talking about, how to grow a law firm, that the hardest part is knowing where you are and where you want to be. And once you've got that figured out, it really is just a straight line from point A to point B, and you just have to keep showing up and keep doing the work. And if you know who you are and you know where you want to be, then, in my mind, that it's the vision, right? So in my mind, the destination is already real. It just hasn't manifested yet in today's world. But in my head, it's already as real as if it existed. So, this has been a challenge that I've had with my wife because, it's hard to be the spouse of a law firm owner, especially, trying to grow and going through all the challenges that you face, where her vision wasn't always, she's not inside my head, right? So in my head, we've already succeeded. We've already achieved these goals. It's just a matter of going through the steps to make it reality. But it's that vision and holding on to that vision with determination, with the word that was used, tenacity, and just not letting go and just keep showing up day after day, dealing with the challenges, dealing with the adversity, and knowing that you're going to get where you need to get because there's no other option. And I think that mindset has what's gotten us to where we are today, and we continue to grow.
And I think our listeners need to know that because everybody thinks there's some secret out there. There's no big secret. It's really, everybody has the same amount of days, the same amount of minutes, the same amount of hours. And listen, we know you don't have to be the smartest person in the world, or I wouldn't have built 2 successful law practices. The deal is the book Grit says it don't. It's what you guys said. It's mindset, it's resilience, it's having vision, and all three of you are very humble, by the way. And that's also something that's very important, I think. You all have talked about other people in your firm and other people that have helped you. Humbleness is such a big deal about it and growing, I think. I think that makes, it's part of what they call, a team player is having somebody that's humble but confident. And y'all all humble, but you're very confident. And there's nothing wrong with that. So here's the one thing, and I'm really interested in this question. What is one of the biggest challenges you faced when you started having rapid growth? And then how did you deal with it? And we're going to start with, we'll start with Matt.
Cash flow. There's lots of challenges. We've had to reinvent ourselves as an organization. It seems like every 2 or 3 years. And, the problem is we try to develop processes and procedures, but then we're a different organization 2 or 3 years later, maybe with new operating systems, maybe we just need new procedures, we have new departments. But the biggest challenge, particularly I think for personal injury, where we don't get paid until the end of the case, is cash flow. You're spending money to, like Bert was talking about, to acquire the cases. And then once you've acquired the cases, you need to increase your payroll to handle the cases. And it may be, 12 or 18 months after you've signed those cases that you're starting to appreciate the revenues from bringing in those cases. So I think it's a cautionary tale. And I feel like I've gotten myself overextended probably 3 or 4 times in the last 8 years, just growing the firm. Like you said, 5 years in a row, 100% year over year growth. And I think my biggest mistake in the growth of the firm was underestimating how long it will take for the growth, the increased caseload to start generating increased revenues. And, fortunately, I was able to find the credit that I needed to kind of get me through those growth periods, those leaner times, and wait for the revenues to catch up to the expenses. But I think somebody who's about to launch their firm into, aggressive growth, it's something to be really, mindful about is every dollar you spend on marketing, you're going to need to spend at least that much on payroll. And however quickly you think those fees are going to start coming in, it's going to take longer. And so being mindful of that going into it can maybe help you avoid some of those problems.
Yeah. Vern Harness, scaling up, I'm a big fan of his, and I'm a scaling up coach, certified coach. But he always said, I remember him saying, he says, you can make it and get by with, average players, team members, and you can get by with average marketing, you can get by with average execution. He says, but when you don't have, he said, when the cash is gone, game over. You know what I'm saying? So that's a good lesson to learn. Scott, how about you? What was one of your biggest challenges and what you faced when you started experiencing this rapid growth?
Well, Matt brings up a great point, because I think this is it's a challenge for any organization. And it reminds me of a story that Richard Branson tells when he was formulating his mega empire in the early days. And he talks about, there'd be days where he'd go ahead and he'd give his wife this paperwork to sign. She'd sign it. And she'd say, oh, hey, by the way, what was that I just signed? It's just like, oh, well, if this venture doesn't work out, we lose the house and everything. And I think you got to just, whatever your passion, vision is, whatever you're doing, you build up a risk tolerance, and you just got to get used to taking kind of calculated risk and chances. And, and it's just like, coming from a background of scarcity, like, we all did at one point, starting with nothing, for me, it's always about building for tomorrow. And the way that I have tried to do that is I feel the greatest safety if I can surround myself with as many cases as I can, just because I know that, eventually what goes in the pipeline sooner or later is going to come out the other side. Not everything, but it's a law of averages. And so, for me, it's, that's a great point. And as far as practical ways of doing that, since most people that are starting their law practices are not doing so with a huge boatload of cash, they've got to look at other ways of doing it in terms of either over time building up their inventory, or, getting lines of credit and financing set up either through banks or through, law funding entities that will value their cases, so they can go ahead and take the actions today to build for that tomorrow when these cases start to turn around a year or two or longer down the road. And then one of the other challenges is mentoring, and that's where your organization, Ken, PILMA, is so wonderful, where brings together lawyers from all across the country. I mean, look here on this podcast, you've got Matt from the West Coast, we've got Bert from New Mexico, I'm out of Atlanta, and we all come together in a collaborative way as far as sharing the common challenges that we faced, and just in innovative solutions that we came up with as far as dealing with them. So I would say those would be two of the greatest challenges, I would say.
Okay, Bert, how about you?
I grew it until about 15 people, and then that's when the rapid growth began. So the challenges, as I started experiencing rapid growth, were, in a sense, cash flow, but it was also case flow and figuring out who was doing what and how to organize. And this organizational psychology and just organization period has been really vital to how we've adapted to the growth and been able to accommodate the new cases. And so that includes, for instance, right before the COVID, fortunately, before we all went remote, we organized everybody into these teams. Ronnie here used to kind of be the lead of everybody, but then we figured out, we can only manage so many people, about 7 people. And so we organized everybody into teams with an always evolving structure that, for communicating between the teams or throughout the teams, which I'm doing, with you, Ken, and through the Scaling Up program. But that was the biggest challenge, so that we could figure out where the bottlenecks are. And like, just for instance, 10 months or 12 months ago, it was in the settlements, and Ronnie and Greg and I worked on how to massage the numbers of those teams and how to work with that team to get the cash flow going again. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge and continues to be.
It's ongoing.
Yeah. As I say, it's always something, right? Yeah. I mean, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. But so what are some of the biggest challenges you think are facing lawyers today or law firm owners? And we'll start with Scott.
There are three challenges I feel are facing law firms today. One of those is talent. We live in a society where we have a labor shortage, where there are two jobs chasing every person that's looking for work. So that is a challenge that faces nearly every business in America. Two is accountability in terms of, and it ties in with number one, and that is in terms of holding people accountable to standards and core values, and how you do that in such a very tight labor market. And three is the challenge of maintaining culture in a virtual environment. So I would say those are the three biggest challenges that I feel are facing law firms in America today.
Okay. Bert, what do you think?
Actually, as you asked that question, I wrote down a couple of things, and it's exactly what Scott said. Labor shortage.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge that we are facing, and we understand many law firms are facing, and I think that includes defense firms as well, and culture. And so because of the labor shortage, you've got to be really on top of your game in terms of the culture so that people don't get frustrated and leave, because retention is just as important as finding the right people. Because you lose one person, you got to hire one more person. And culture, not meaning nap pods and salads for lunch. Like, well, we're doing that actually, salads. But it's actually, that's healthy, right? So we don't get tired in the afternoon. But culture in terms of, the many things that go into doing things well and right and according to your values, but just being very mindful of retention.
Matt?
I think I'm going to be a little bit optimistic. Yes, there's a labor shortage, and it's driven up the cost of labor. And, sometimes it is harder to hold people accountable, but it's also created amazing opportunities. And Scott mentioned about a more kind of virtual workplace. And we now have people in key roles in our firm who are in Costa Rica and in the Philippines, and they're eager for the work. They're some of the best workers we have in our firm. And then the challenge really is, as both Bert and Scott mentioned, is the culture, right? And maintaining that culture across a virtual environment. I frankly think the biggest challenge facing law firms, maybe over the next 10 years, is if the trend continues of allowing non-lawyers to own law firms. I think there could be a massive influx of venture capital into big national law firm conglomerates, which I think, number one, creates a real challenge for marketing and case acquisition for existing firms, but also I think threatens the unique relationship that we as an industry have worked so hard to develop with our clients, that we are in a service industry and it's based on relationships of familiarity and trust between us and our clients. And I'm definitely concerned about the direction the industry might be heading if they start to allow non-attorneys to own law firms.
Yeah. So follow up on that. That's actually, you just led me right into my next question, Matt. And I will ask Bert to start with. Do you guys have any people working remotely? And we know Matt does, and I think I know the answer to this anyway, and if you do, how do you manage them? And does it affect your firm's culture? Because they're like in the Philippines, they're in Costa Rica. I'll start with you, Bert. And some of them could be even in the United States, I guess.
Well, when we went remote during the COVID, we realized we can hire people remotely. And so we expanded our talent pool to across the country. And so we have 25 people working outside of Albuquerque throughout the country. So we've been doing that for a couple of years. Creating those teams, like I mentioned, worked very well. We've got a couple of team leads in other states. This is staff only, not lawyers. All the lawyers, we thought about that. We don't want it. We want our lawyers here. But I think the management can be a little harder, but with the quality of the leads that we have in remote areas, I think they do a good job. Can you talk on that?
They do a great job. And with our system and how we measure productivity, we always we're very transparent, first of all, with monitoring their metrics and their KPIs. We have reports that go out to them, to their entire team, daily, weekly, monthly. So everybody knows how, what they're doing, how they're doing, and how their team is doing. So it makes it very easy for the leads to manage their team. All the data is always there for them. They do their daily huddles with their team. Each team has a daily huddle and they have to meet and they have a win, stop, and a priority for the day. They also go over their KPIs and metrics daily. And then we do have once a week a mini huddle for each team. Each team will have a little mini huddle, and it's kind of a fun huddle where they don't talk about work. They do something to get to know each other personally. They have a game. They do different little exercises just to kind of connect with these remote workers and with all of us together. Each team does it. So we do a lot of work on the culture to maintain a good relation with the Zoom employees. We call them the Zoom team, so that they can feel as integrated as possible as the on-site employees.
We don't like to call people remote.
I like that. Yeah, that makes sense. How about you, Scott? How are you doing it?
Well, that's a great question, because you can tell by the answers from Matt and Bert and his team, it's affected all of our law firms. And when you look back prior to the pandemic, it was easy to have a mentality that if a person is in the office and they're working at their station, that they're being productive. And so it's like, then when the pandemic hit, it is like it took like about 3 years of technological change, and it just compressed it into about 3 months. And then all of a sudden, everybody is working remote, and all of a sudden it becomes, after you go through that transition and you've got your, domestic team members and they're working remote and they're productive, then I think that just the next logical step is what you've heard Matt, Bert, and others mention. And that is just in terms of just sourcing, why would you not source the best talent? And it's just like, if a person's searching for the best lawyer, it's not necessarily, why would you limit that search just only to your hometown? So, it's just, and not only that, but in addition to that, I think there was a mindset shift in terms of viewing the quality of international workers prior to the pandemic and what you have now. And, you hear very positive feedback from Matt and Bert, and I agree 1000% with both of that in terms of, statistically, when you measure that productivity of our international team members versus domestic team members, not only do they do well, they do on average better. And so that's been another mind shift as well. And that's something that, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, forcing that type of technological change, it's not something that probably for my firm that we would have ever done. Because prior to the pandemic, we very much had the mentality as far as everyone being on site. And now we've had the shift that it doesn't matter where a person is. What matters is what is that person producing. And also when you listen to your people, in terms of, what do you want? One of the number one top things you will hear is flexibility and a hybrid system. And we offer that to all of our people. So we have everybody has the option of a hybrid system, or they can work remote completely in a lot of instances as well. And so, it's also too, I think, that's one of the other things we're talking about in terms of a highly competitive labor market where we have a shortage of workers in this country. It forces businesses, if they're going to continue to growth, most important asset we have is our people. And so to continue that growth, we've got to add more people. And if the domestic market's not supplying it, then we've got to look at other places. And so in terms of monitoring performance, I believe that was one of the questions as well. Some of the software programs that we've used at various times have been desk time, Work Examiner, and Active Track.
Cool. Matt?
Scott mentioned the acceleration of technology and the application of technology with our firms. And, I think I always like to look for a silver lining in every situation. And this may be one of the greatest benefits to come through the COVID pandemic, is that it did force us to be more nimble, to be more creative with the use of technology in our businesses. We were fortunate to have transitioned. We were almost completely transitioned to a cloud-based case management system before the pandemic. We were probably 90% paperless before the pandemic. So it made it really easy for us to transition to almost a completely remote work environment where everyone was working from home. And look, I'm still not 100% converted. I still believe that an attorney with their staff in close proximity develop a ease of communication and mutual understanding and familiarity that results in higher quality representation on average than teams that are spread out across geographic locations. We do have one attorney who lives in a part of Washington State where we don't have an office. And I'm so glad we hired her. She's an excellent attorney. And her team is here in my Seattle office. So they are, using technology to communicate, and they're doing fine. I still think there are trade-offs. You certainly increase the pool of talent that you can choose from. But I do think it takes more effort, it takes more intentionality to really develop and maintain the level of communication and the quality of communication that you need. And so, Bert mentioned huddles and meetings. Having a regular cadence of meetings, both within each team and across the whole firm, is essential as we grow across multiple locations and add more people who aren't in any of our locations but are just working from home, to both make sure that our workflow is going the way it needs to, and that we're maintaining who we are. We're maintaining our culture across whatever platform it is that we're using.
All right, we're getting almost out of time. I want to ask you one final question and then your final thoughts. What do you see as the biggest marketing challenge that you're going to have in the next 2 to 3 years? Bert?
Well, it ties in with the labor shortage. We're growing, but we need the people to handle the growth. And so the marketing challenge is really continuing to be consistent, not pulling back, but also meeting the demand of all the clients that need our help, and also taking on the Spanish speaking market, which is something we're going to be trying to do real soon. We've got a cadre of Spanish speakers already working in the firm. And so we'd like to help those Spanish speakers as well.
There you go. Scott, what do you see?
In terms of the biggest marketing challenge, it's, there's no silver bullet, because I feel like marketing is always trying to hit a moving target. The things that worked 6 years ago, 6 months ago, always need to be tweaked because they're good until they're not good anymore. And then so I think it's the biggest challenge, I think, is going to be tracking the source of new business, finding out what marketing is the most effective for you, because what's the most effective for you might not be the most effective for me. You may do it way better than me in those areas. But whatever it is, finding out what works well, what has an effective cost per case, knowing your numbers, knowing your tracking, using your resources wisely to put them in those resources, and markets that are going to generate more return, and avoiding things that are wasteful and squandering your resources.
There you go. Matt?
I think Seattle's a pretty unique market in personal injury marketing, or has been over the last 10 years, in that I think we've been undersaturated with personal injury marketing. And I think it has been maybe easier to get a return on your marketing investment than some other markets. And that's changing rapidly. So we've got incumbent players who have been here for a long time that are starting to spend a lot more on marketing and advertising. And then we've got new firms from out of state that are coming in and starting to spend more money. And I don't see that trend changing over the next 3 to 5 years. So I think for us, the biggest challenge, already being one of the top players in our market now, is to really cement our identity and our brand in the market and establish ourselves as the local attorneys, as the attorneys. Our tagline, and it really was based on an exhaustive examination of who we are as attorneys, as people, and as a law firm, is tough, reliable, human. And we really emphasize the human part of it, that we genuinely want to develop meaningful long-term relationships with our clients. And we feel we're just like our clients. We're from here, we're members of the community. And I think the more that we can, through community engagement and through our more traditional marketing, really establish that identity as local and human and genuine, then we inoculate ourselves against that massive influx of money from big national firms that just can never have that advantage that we have, having been doing this for as long as we have here in this market.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, this has been great. I appreciate all your time. If you got any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with our listeners and viewers, the floor is yours. And we'll start with Matt. If you don't have to. You do, you can.
Look, I assume people are watching or listening to this because they want to grow their firm. And the advice that I've been giving for years to people, asking that kind of question and wondering, like, how do I grow my firm, is just do something, right? Again, I go back to my first point. Know where you are. And Scott said, know your numbers. If you don't know where you are, you're lost. So that's the first thing. Know where you are. And then spend some time figuring out, with as much clarity and specificity as you can, where do you want to be? And then just do something every day. Be doing something to move yourself from where you are to where you want to be. And the results will come. If you do that, I believe it's inevitable.
Scott?
Think outside the box. Look at every point of client contact that there is, especially points that create friction, and find out ways that you can address that from your client perspective, and find out ways you can change your messaging so you can rise above the kind of the white noise of the competition. So think outside the box. One of the things that, for instance, that we do is, when our clients come in for an office visit, we have a giant monitor on the wall that says welcome. It has their name on it, and it says, we're glad you're here. And there's nothing more beautiful to a person than the sound of their own name, or seeing their own name on a billboard, if you will. And so they'll come in, they'll take pictures of it, but it creates that type of connection, that rapport, the trust, because ultimately people want to do business with those that they know, like, and trust. So I would say that. And then also too, just in terms of realizing that oftentimes what are perceived as disadvantages are really your greatest advantages. And if you can find those niches and just use that to separate yourself from the competition and rise above the noise, that's what I would say.
Deal. Bert?
It's not about how, and it's not even about why. It's about who. It's about who you hire, who you work with, who you represent, and who you get together with every once in a while, like you guys, like-minded people who are on this path of growth and improvement and success. And if there's anything any parting words I would have to say is, make sure you're with the right people doing it together.
Good words of wisdom, all of you. Listen, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you all in the Bahamas in November, maybe some of you in October, for our next mastermind meeting at and hopefully all the hurricanes will be gone by then. So, hopefully. So anyway, thank you so much, and I'll see you guys then. Take care. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.